You'll remember that things got so bad in some Ontario long-term care homes that the Canadian military was called in, which is a remarkable and terrible thing. And the things that they found were awful.
Back on this Monday, the first day of December, 2025, with Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Derek Turner, also in the room, by the way, producing this evening's program. We talk a lot, and we talked about this last week, about healthcare on this program, and tonight's episode certainly no different.
Yeah, when I look back at the list of episodes we've done since we officially launched, there have been a lot of healthcare ones, but it's because it's a big issue that people talk about. Today's no different. We're going to talk about the care that people are receiving at long-term care homes. Sort of the 10,000-foot version is that we knew from COVID that there were all kinds of problems. You remember just the horror stories coming out of long-term care homes during COVID, not just the fatalities, people dying, but just the conditions that people were reporting. And there was a brutal report done by the Canadian military that actually went in to help at some of these things, just talking about how bad it was. Yeah. And so the government announced changes, they legislated those changes, and they've been measuring those changes. And they all deal with kind of the amount of hands-on care that a patient is getting throughout the day. And we're going to talk to Jessica Smith-Cross, who's our editor-in-chief at the Trillium, our bureau at Queen's Park, because they're not busy enough with the stuff they're doing with the Skills Development Fund, all their great reporting on that. But Jess dug up some data that took more than a year to get this data via Freedom of Information, just about how nursing homes are measuring up to the new rules that are in place. Yeah. And it's fascinating. I don't want to spoil it because I want to let her unveil it, but it's fascinating, and it's scary at the same time.
If the COVID-19 pandemic revealed anything, it's that the province's long-term care homes needed a major overhaul, with staffing levels at the top of the list. The Ford government made some big promises, and years later, we have a better idea of how one of those promises is panning out. Joining us tonight to explain all the details is Jessica Smith-Cross, our editor-in-chief at the Trillium, our bureau at Queen's Park. Jess, always a pleasure.
Hi, guys. Always good to see you.
Okay, Jess, you just published yet another excellent piece of investigative journalism that took many months and likely lots of patience to put together. It's all about the amount of hands-on care that patients are receiving in long-term care homes across the province. Now, we want to dig into all the details that you've uncovered, but let's begin with some background here. During COVID, the province learned a hard lesson about long-term care homes. What was it?
Staffing matters, and it matters a lot. So when COVID started going through long-term care homes, some homes, it was hard. It was hard on all of the people who live there and all the people who work there, but some homes managed it better than others. You'll remember that things got so bad in some Ontario long-term care homes that the Canadian military was called in, which is a remarkable and terrible thing. And the things that they found were awful. The fallout of that is still going on. There are court cases across the province related to some of the experiences that happened. But what came out of it from the government's perspective was an acknowledgement that the staffing really does matter. And so the government promised that all long-term care homes would give residents an average of 4 hours of what they call hands-on care a day, and that they would fund them in order so that they can do that. So what that means is that in the long-term care home, there will be enough nurses and personal support workers specifically so that their working time equals 4 hours per resident per day. It's not like exactly every resident gets 4 hours. It's an average, and some residents have higher needs than others. Though in long-term care, the needs are pretty high, right?
I see. Oh, so it's really like a division question. There's how many staff we have, there's how many patients we have, so it equals that they each get 4 hours. Okay, that's clear.
Jess, the government has been releasing some data about the progress that homes are making on this front. How detailed is the data that they've been releasing?
So the province has voluntarily been releasing like a province-wide average. So if you take all of the hours personal support workers and nurses work in the whole province's long-term care homes and divide them by the number of resident days or days any residents spend in any long-term care homes, this is how we're doing. Are we going to get the whole province to the 4 hours a day goal? And what that has said is the province did make its goal. It was a few months later than it planned to do, which was about a year ago. But it got there, and it has put in billions of dollars to increase the funding to pay for these staff to do that. But what the province had refused to do was release data on individual homes. So there are all kinds of long-term care homes in Ontario, and we knew that it would be not every home was making this goal. Some homes outperformed it, bringing up the average, and some homes didn't make it for lots of different kinds of reasons. So what I did was do a Freedom of Information Act request. This is where we can request documents from the government, pay some money, wait some time, and get them because they're public information. And this data that I got was the home by home breakdown, how many nurse and personal support worker hours each quarter, so quarter of a year, and then how many resident hours. And you can do the math and see who's doing what. That data was for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Mm-hmm. We work on the March calendar in government. And why that is because it took about a year and a half to get these documents from the government through the FOI process. And that's what's in the story we're talking about today.
Well, I was going to say it definitely took a lot longer than for you to explain what you requested. It took months and months to get it. And in fact, I believe the Information Commissioner actually had to get involved at some point. Before we get into details, let's talk about that, because I don't think a lot of people understand how hard it is to wrestle this information out of the government sometimes. So you put in the request. Why was it delayed for so long?
It seemed like a couple of different reasons. The first, it went to the Ministry of Health, and they're slow. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I can say beyond it takes them longer than it takes most ministries to do these things. They have a lot of data and they're slow. But the province had also spun up its own independent Ministry of Long-Term Care separately from the Ministry of Health. And during this year, in which I was more than a year that I was waiting for these documents, they got their own FOI department. And then they got carriage of this thing. And they, to their credit, they contacted me. They got it going. And to the government's credit, it decided that, yes, this is public information that should be released according to the freedom of information laws that we have here. The civil servants make those determinations. And they're like, okay, we're going to release it to you. But a couple of, they call them third parties, but some of the long-term care homes or chains, and I don't know which ones, objected to the release, filed an appeal. That went to an information commissioner and was eventually dropped. And we have the data.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's definitely, you're very patient. And I think your hunch obviously was right too, because when you received the data, it did show that some were doing very well and some were not doing so well. What struck you about the data?
That it did mirror what we saw coming out of the pandemic. So when COVID hit, the province released a lot of data about COVID, right? Who got COVID, who died, stuff like that. And they broke it down by long-term care homes. And so there was some academic research done that came to a couple of big conclusions. Homes that were owned by private companies, particularly some of the big ones, had fared not so well. So they had bigger outbreaks, more people had died, and homes that were older in their building and that had and fewer staff were some of the reasons that a risk factor for having a bigger outbreak. That's not to say this didn't happen in homes that were run by municipalities or nonprofits. It's just when it came down to it, some of the worst ones were generally concentrated in these for-profit chains, which I should probably explain to people because that sounds all a little bit confusing, what the difference between a for-profit home and a nonprofit and a municipal home is.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll scratch that question off the list. Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, just talking. There are three different ownership models. So you might find that your local municipality or region owns a long-term care home and runs a long-term care home, and some of your tax dollars would go to it and subsidize it. You might find, and this is what the data showed, that they spend more on staffing than if they didn't have the tax base helping it out a little bit. You can also have homes that are run by not-for-profit organizations. These can be religious or cultural groups that run homes catering to specific, seniors from specific religions or cultural affiliations, languages, and stuff like that. They tend to do fundraising to supplement their budgets as well. You can also have for-profit homes that are run as businesses, some of them private, some of them publicly traded, but for-profit businesses that do make a profit out of this. And all of these homes get the same funding from the province, with some differences that aren't dependent on their ownership. And they also charge the same things to residents. So they just make their business model work within that sort of rubric of government funding, and that patients pay, which is regulated by the province.
Interesting. So did your data show the same kind of thing? Say, for example, would for-profit homes have fewer staff in this data that you found?
Yes. So to describe it, the ones at the very low end were all for profits. The ones with the lowest staffing that had missed the targets by the longest shots were for profit. And there was one chain in particular that was overrepresented. At the top end, the ones with a lot of staffing, there was a mix. So municipal, some independent for-profit and not-for-profit homes had managed their homes to have a lot of hands-on care for their residents.
Your article makes a point of reminding folks too that these aren't just numbers on a page. We're talking about quality of life of these people. Can you speak to that, Jess?
Yeah. So two of the people I talked to did a pretty good job of driving that home. So when you're in long-term care, you generally have a pretty high level of need. That's why you're there. And so what the lack of a lot of hands-on care time can mean is that you're maybe not turned in your bed as often as you should be and get like a bed sore, right? That's a pretty common problem in long-term care. And it takes manpower to make sure that people don't get those. And if they do, that they're treated. They can mean more falls, right? You need help to get around. If there's no help, you have more at risk of a fall, or a transfer from a bed to a wheelchair could go wrong, stuff like that. And then one of the people I talked to was an MPP, but also a nurse who's worked in long-term care, said there's also just like the spending time, having conversations, making sure that the people who live in these homes have somebody to talk to when their family is able to visit, if, sometimes they aren't at all.
A great point. What's fascinating about the piece too is, as you always do, there's a great graphic that goes with this. It's very searchable, that anybody can go onto the Trillium, no matter what community you live in, and search the homes in your area. You should maybe lie when I ask you this question, but you're so good at this stuff, Jess. But how much work do you have to put in to kind of create that for people to use that tool? You should say it takes weeks and weeks.
No, it's not a click of a button. It was a bit of math, a bit of spreadsheeting, many hours of spreadsheeting to make sure that the data that comes from the ministry is analyzed and cleaned up. For example, we have different quarters of data, and they're going to spell the name of the same long-term care home differently for some reason in 3 different quarters. So cleaning that up to match. So it creates this thing in the story where you can go in and type in the name of a long-term care home that you're interested in, and then you can find the data that we have, whether they were below or above target. Or
Jess, what's the reaction been to the story?
Pretty strong. It's been one that people have read a lot, and I've heard from all sorts of people. I've got a couple of people who've worked in long-term care who want to tell me what they experienced in the not so good things they experienced as people who at work are working in long-term care. I've also had a long-term care home come up, say, like, I want to show you what success looks like. And they've invited me to come visit their home, and I'm going to do that in a couple of weeks to see if things going well. I also heard from, like a person who's like, I'm going to need long-term care home at some point, probably. How do I find the right one? Some questions about that. All sorts of responses.
Well, that's great. And that tool definitely helps people. Just if they're thinking about if that's one of the things, the stats they want to look for, it's available. There's not a lot of information like that. The big question for me, Jess, is, it took you 18 months to get it. Is the government committing to saying, we're just going to give you this data, we're going to release this data on a regular basis now that we know it exists?
No, I have done a request for the following data and more up to date, and I hope that it comes quicker this time.
Yeah, maybe it shouldn't. I mean, you've kind of paved the way. for it to happen. I do want to point out that this all happened in the midst of all the amazing reporting you and your team have been doing on the Skills Development Fund. So in the middle of all the big scoops you're getting, all of a sudden this great deeper dive investigative piece lands as well. So first of all, kudos for that, to be able to juggle all that. I do want to ask you, you were on the show a couple weeks ago talking about the crowdfunding campaign that we've launched, raising funds to help with the cost of some of the FOI requests related to the Skills Development Fund. Can you give us a quick update on how that's going and what the reaction's been around Queen's Park?
Yeah, we surpassed what we called the first tier goal. So we sort of set a couple of goals for ourselves, raise the money we need to get all of these freedom of information requests paid for. All these have to do with this ongoing training fund controversy where I won't go into the whole thing now, but we did some requests for documents that are going to be pretty expensive to get. So we're asking people to help pay for it. And if we hit that goal, we're gonna publish these documents publicly, and we're gonna make sure that our stories that we write about them are on paywalls for everybody to read. So people have been listening. We've raised enough to pass our first tier goal and get this bunch of requests, and we're well on our way to getting towards the second. And I hope that we get there, because these are documents that are, I think, have the possibility to tell us a lot about this sort of scandal that everybody's talking about at Queen's Park right now.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to link back to where the people can donate or they can contribute, and also some of the back coverage that explains what it is that we're doing.
All right. Anything else, Jess, you guys are working on that we should know about?
Oh, always, There's a committee hearing going on right now. We've got this government's taken over school boards. We've got stuff on the go.
That's right. We shouldn't keep you any longer, Jess.
Never a dull moment. There she is, Jessica Smith-Cross, our editor-in-chief at the Trillium. Thanks as always, Jess.
Thanks, guys.
If I ever need help with my Excel spreadsheets, I think Jess is the one I'll be reaching out to.
I'm really giving you inside baseball, but she teaches other journalists how to do what she does, and she's great at it.
Yep.
Having that conversation, it brought me back. She mentioned the military going into the homes during COVID.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
They were writing reports to their superiors as if they were on the front lines of Kandahar.
Yes.
They were also released under Freedom of Information, and they were just. You couldn't even believe what you were reading, that this was Canada, this was Ontario, the conditions they were describing in these homes. And it kind of left the government with no choice but to act. As Jess pointed out, overall, on average, the numbers are getting better in terms of, right? But as you know, just a smart decision to go and ask for the specific data, because it shows that although some might be doing really well, there's a whole bunch that aren't doing very well. And I can tell you, you should check out this story. We'll put the link in our write-up here. Sure. Just for the database alone. Go in there. Wherever you live in Ontario, you can search for the local homes in your community, and you can see where they measure up. And I'm sure, we might have, you have parents and you have your parents in these homes, your relatives, people you love, or people you're thinking about. You're thinking about a loved one having to go to these homes. It's a great tool. There's, it's just another piece of the research you should be doing. And we will also link to the crowdfunding page so that you can check that out. Absolutely. And if you feel like helping us out, that would be terrific. All right, that's it for us tonight. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. Tonight's program, as always, produced by Derek Turner. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Appreciate your time tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.